incredible dodo, new mammoth, sloth that isn't inferior to elephants in weight, and a dreadful worm from night terrors. In this episode, you'll learn about these and other surprising creatures. Today, I'll show you last photos and videos of creepy extinct animals. King Kong in real life. Have you seen the movie about this legendary ape? I'm guessing that even if some of you aren't the most dedicated fans of the franchise, the size and strength of the primate still impressed you. Nevertheless, you thought to yourself, yeah, so what? It's all fiction, so we wouldn't be surprised by the special effects of the top movies. What if I tell you now that in real life there was also such a monkey, and without any filters? Yes, it wasn't the size of a multi-story building, but I remind you, this is real life. Here in front of you is a mutant primate that went extinct 100 years ago. In those days, people were just learning to use technology. Science was not always at the highest level, so it was not possible to control or study the ape in any way. We could only be satisfied with its appearance. Unfortunately for people, this real-life King Kong didn't last long in such conditions and died in his sleep after only a couple of weeks. According to sources, its body was later given for examination, but that was too late. A lot of the things had decomposed and fallen into disrepair, which doomed a potentially breakthrough project to failure. Despite the fact that such large primates no longer exist nowadays, monkeys as such remain, and this gives us small but still hope. What can't be said about the Mauritian dodo, or as it's also called, just the dodo. This is an extinct bird that was endemic to the island of Mauritius. It disappeared from the face of the earth supposedly in the 17th century, and there are many interesting details around this story. For example, sailors landed on the territory close to their habitat, and you can imagine didn't see a single feathered bird. They thought that they just hid somewhere, but in fact, during the whole visit, they met at least one dodo. Sailors mentioned this to the other people. They showed no reaction, as if nothing surprising or scary was going on. Soon, no one saw the birds at all. However, they weren't still recognized as extinct. Most likely it was because of religious values and some beliefs. They said that extinction of an entire species is impossible. Such nonsense lasted until the 19th century, when people finally woke up and realized that the dodos actually disappeared from the earth. So we unfortunately cannot observe any new videos of dodos. We can only judge about them from the annals of sailors who told us that the bird was gray or brown in color and with white long feathers on its wings. The head was bald, but it was harmoniously complemented by a huge beak, which could reach up to 8 inches or even more. With its help, they successfully attracted representatives of the opposite sex, hunted and defended their territory. And here a logical question occurs: so why did they become extinct? Those were simple birds and not the weakest ones. What prevented them from surviving? There are many hypotheses on this subject, but mostly all of them are connected with people. These birds were mercilessly caught and used as a hearty breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In addition, humans introduced dogs, pigs, rats, and other non-native animals to the pristine island and spoiled the dodo's native habitat. Along with this, the forests were polluted, trees were cut down, and as usual, people had a hand in something, and that something soon disappeared from the face of the earth. Caspian tiger. 70 years ago, the Caspian tigers were running merrily on the grass and shining their unique sideburns. Now, only legends are made about them. If I ask you what you associate the Caucasus with, you'll name anything but tigers. And for nothing, because about 100 years ago, there were really a lot of them there. The Transcaucasian or Caspian tiger is one of the subspecies of the largest striped cat on the planet. And also, judging by a lot of DNA analysis, it has the greatest similarity to the Amur tiger. Most likely, a couple thousand years ago, they were one mega population. However, because of human agricultural activities, their habitats were divided and separate, independent subspecies were born. As I said, it was one of the biggest tigers, so it wasn't difficult to distinguish it from other tigers. Cat weighed about 550 pounds and was famous for its unique sideburns. The tiger grew hair on its cheeks in winter, which added warmth and, as a consequence, increased its survival rate. And the survivability, as it later turned out, was at a very high level. Anyway, that was the weakest of its characteristics. The Caspian tiger was incredibly strong and at the same time as stealthy as possible. Even the most renowned ninjas would envy its camouflage and agile hunting. The same ordinary people, some farmers who have lived in the same place for decades, couldn't have suspected that all this time, literally tens of meters away from them, there was a Caspian tiger. Although, for the sake of truth, it's unlikely that this tiger has been in the same place for a long time. After all, when the animal lacked expect food, it could easily go far away and look for it in a completely different place. It's believed that these tigers could walk up to 60 miles a day if they were hungry. But what difference does it make how far you can walk if there's no food either here or there? According to the classics, the Trans-Caucasian tiger became extinct because of man's fault. The domestication of land for agriculture dropped tigers of their main food base, wild boars and roe deer. Hunting of these animals, which are rare trophies for people, was added to this. As a result, very soon there was no trace of them left. The good news is that people are gradually beginning to think and find ways to restore the population. For this purpose, for example, in 2017, they have already allocated a huge area for their existence. It's planned to restore the tiger's forage base by importing Bukhara deer. Columbian mammoth. I'm sure not many of you have heard of this mammoth. However, it's actually very strange because in its time it was one of the largest in the world. And even today, this is the case. The height at the shoulder of adult males reached 13 feet, and their weight was about 10 tons. Namely, on average, Columbian mammoths were taller than the African bush elephants by a meter and heavier by 5 tons. Moreover, the giants surprised not only by their inconceivable body size, but also by their mind-boggling tusks. Sometimes they could be almost as long as the big guys themselves. The animal didn't stutter on its teeth, only because their tips crossed each other. The mammoth had wool, as befitted all its brethren, but it was not so thick. Otherwise, in appearance and lifestyle, the Columbian mammoth didn't differ in any way from the modern elephants. Their herds consisted of females, and the male cubs were driven out by the age of 10. The company was led by a female matriarch. The animals grazed in the steppes and munched on vegetation. Every day, they ate 250 pounds of greens and slept for 4 hours. The wolves, big cats, all of them of course posed a danger to the giant. However, huge fangs together with titanic strength still outweighed the odds in favor of the mammoth. The human was the one they had far less of a chance to escape. To be more precise, it was against the Paleo-Indians, who were constantly hunting them with great success, which led to the complete extinction of the species. Do you remember sloths? Those cute tiny creatures that you just want to touch? Don't worry, they didn't die out. Only their ancient brethren did, who stood out from the crowd for their enormous size. Giant sloths, or to be more precise, the Erematherium, are majestic animals of the past, which could weigh up to 5 tons. And it's not only that they have such an impressive weight, along with it they had long claws, sometimes reaching as much as 12 inches in length. Few would want to argue with such dangerous giants, so they almost didn't have any enemies in the natural environment. In addition, the giants themselves also didn't want to quarrel at all. They didn't eat meat. Like fresh leaves, they chopped with their long claws. Of course, if an insolent predator wanted to be eaten, the sloths didn't refuse. However, that was the exception to the rule. Until recently, people thought that these sloths lived alone. Really, why would they need mates? To help pick leaves off trees? Or fight against some small cat? Of course, the giants could cope with everything independently. But despite this, paleontologists found many bodies of sloths surrounded by fellow creatures. On average, their groups ranged from 5 to 20 individuals. But what they gathered together for, no one has yet understood. Hallucigenia. If I had seen this monster in any of my dreams, I would have woken up immediately, taking it for a horrible nightmare my imagination had never shown before. But in fact, we have a real extinct creature in front of us. Based on this study, I think you can make a separate movie in the detective and thriller genres. So the story of this creature began in the distant 1911, when a scientist got to study this strange something. Apparently, the man didn't want to fret about this creature. 66 years passed and the study of the strange creature got on to another, slightly more interested person. At least he examined it under a microscope and gave it an appropriate name, hallucigenia. Paleontologists called the monster so because it looked too ugly and incomprehensible, like a creature from our nightmares or visions with maximally vague and unclear contours. The reconstruction of its external appearance also turned out to be not less intriguing, some nonsense on legs. It's absolutely unclear where the mouth is, where the limbs are, what it eats, and where the food goes to. There's a row of 7 paired spikes along the body on one side. On the other side, you can find 10 soft tentacles, 7 long long and 3 short ones. The scientists jointly thought that the creature moved on spikes, like on stilts, with its dorsal tentacles grabbing food. But once they put these cards together, it turned out that it couldn't be the case. The thing is that the monster couldn't deliver food to the organs. Then people came up with a new version, but it didn't work. It was always something ridiculous and incomprehensible. That was until the case was suspended again and reopened 14 years later. This time, people correlated hallucigenia with worms from China and found that they had similarities. Now, scientists understood where the main organs of the creature were located and took its design to its logical conclusion. It turned out that this mysterious worm moved along the bottom with the help of 7 pairs of clawed tentacles, and its back was protected by the same number of sharp spikes. There were additional long, thin whiskers located on the neck. They were probably covered with feathery structures for filtering organics or searching for food by touch. Nevertheless, scientists still haven't figured out what this guest from the past was eating. We await the results in another couple of decades. Gigantopithecus. This was the name of the ancient genus of humanoid apes that we're about to discuss. They are, of course, already extinct, but the controversy of interest around them hasn't died down to this day. Despite the fact that only jaws and femur bones were found, the scientists calculated their size. It turned out that Gigantopithecus could be up to 10 feet high and weigh up to 1,100 pounds. Gigantopithecus were similar to gorillas in appearance, the same strong body, aggressive temperament, and dominant lifestyle. Oh yeah, how could I forget? They also had an excellent jaw they could munch absolutely anything with. They were particularly fond of bamboo, by the way. And thanks to their size, a pack of hungry giant primates easily took away food from other fans of feeding on tall and tough grass, pandas. The reasons for their extinction are still unknown, but it's speculated that climate change and the loss of their natural habitat due to rainforest decline may be the main vectors. The giant ape-like man remains one of the most mysterious and interesting of the fossil primates. Through studies of fossils and genetic information, scientists hope to uncover more data about its origins and evolution. After all, as it turns out, Gigantopithecus could also use real tools, which sounds just fantastically appealing and unusual. I wish I could invent a time machine, travel back in time with some invisible cloak, and observe these amazing creatures with my own eyes. The main thing is that the mechanism of returning home then didn't break and the cloak didn't fail, because in this case, the ancient creatures will certainly punish us. For example, prehistoric hyenas can do that. They were incredibly dangerous, so much that they held in awe almost the entire continent. The animals were larger than their modern counterparts. If our hyenas weigh up to 88 to 140 pounds on average, those could exceed even a centner. Modern hyenas are still keeping the fauna of the Black Continent on a short leash, competing with lions. And the cave hyenas did the same thing, but only in Eurasia. They lived in groups of 10 to 30 individuals that ran after their leader and followed all its instructions. Horses, spies, and even humans, whoever caught their eye, all of them were defeated. Their insanely powerful and strong jaws allowed them to gnaw through any skin and bones. And in case they had a bad day and found insufficient food, the mad ones could attack their weaker brethren. Cannibalism was quite normal for them. It was only Mother Nature and climate change that helped all other living creatures cope with this mad group. Hadn't this happened, there's no telling what our world would look like today. It's likely that these hyenas could have spread even wider and become one of the most important animals on land. Now I'll tell you about the creatures whose photos you'll never see. They died out several millions of years ago. Is Megalodon not that strong? Sharks are definitely one of the strongest underwater creatures that have been living on our planet for millions and tens of millions of years. Today, there's the great white shark, which is involved in the lion's share of all accidents around the world. Not every creature in the ocean can oppose anything to its aggressive temperament, razor-sharp teeth, speed, and maneuverability, let alone prehistoric creatures, which a priori were much bigger than modern ones. Sharks, as you realize, were no exception. In ancient times, there was Megalodon. It was a giant shark that reached 50 feet in length. Its teeth could be compared to the head of some modern inhabitant, and I'm not even talking about its tail strike at all. Nevertheless, recently, researchers have stumbled upon a new clue in the study of the world of Megalodon. It turns out that this fish may have been much bigger than we thought. Its size, judging by the remains found, could have exceeded 59 feet, which can hardly be explained in any sensible way. In that case, its teeth were even bigger and its tail was even stronger. Now it would be logical to assume that Megalodon is the undisputed king of the world, which is extinct, but when it lived, no one could compete with it. Well, that's not true. Not for nothing did people come up with the saying, the bigger they are, the better they fall. Who knows how the history and development of Megalodon would have unfolded if it had lived in the same time period as Helicoprion. It's also an ancient shark, only it lived much earlier. It can definitely be considered one of the most fantastic and unusual sea creatures that have ever inhabited Earth. Helicoprion means spiral jaw in Latin. Why such a strange name? Well, just take a look at what's on its front. These so-called teeth whorls, located in the form of a spiral or circle, were ready to chop and shred any target on its way, even such a megalodon. The thing is, the record-breaking big shark was strong but clumsy. Also, it could not see what was happening under its body, which means that the much more agile Helicoprion could simply attack it from below. There was no way Megalodon could have defended itself against it. Here's an interesting fact about Helicoprion's teeth. Scientists still can't agree on how they work. Some think that the teeth rotated like a circular saw, cutting the prey into pieces. Others have come to the opinion that during the hunt, teeth unfolded into a kind of chain, clinging to the prey and tearing it to pieces. Some would all suggest that these sharks did not attack anyone at all with the help of the unusual teeth. Allegedly, the spiral served them as an assistant in sawing off the shells of cephalopods, which they fed on, as well as in digging the seabed. Leadsichthys is another monster of the depths that was extinct long before Megalodon. It was far too ordinary looking. At very best, this creature was up to 52 feet long. To call Leadsichthys a predator would be unkind to it. It was a full-fledged killer that could deal with thousands of small crustaceans. Leadsichthys swallowed its prey in giant portions along with the water, after which it filtered it through its gills. Uncontrolled consumption of crustaceans led to the fact that Leadsichthys became one of the largest fish in the history of the planet. Despite growing in height and breadth, Leadsichthys did not develop any additional protection over time. It had no spikes, armor, or even sharp teeth. Even the poor thing's speed decreased noticeably as its size got bigger. That's what happens when you focus on one thing rather than evolving everything. As a result, though the creature was one of the largest, yet promising, time had ruined it. The adapted predators attacked Leadsichthys one by one, gradually biting off a small part of its huge torso. There was nothing the big animal could do about it, but that wasn't what killed the species. The ocean changed, and there were fewer krill in the shallows. With its appetite still high, lack of food, and a bunch of predators around it, Leadsichthys had no chance of survival. Meganeura. It's hard to believe, but in prehistoric times there was a dragonfly with a wingspan of 27.5 inches. This monster flew around the territory of modern Europe and was ready to attack anyone. When these dragonflies were in vogue, they lived near swamps. There are still different opinions on the larvae's habitat. Some researchers suggest that the larvae led a terrestrial lifestyle, while others suggest that the larvae led an aquatic lifestyle. Either way, the larvae reached large size, which means that their appetite also adapted to the changes in their bodies. They wanted to eat more and more. Meganeura now did not disdain eating small fish and small amphibians. The key difference between these dragonflies and modern dragonflies, apart from their size of course, was their incredibly strong wing. It was all veined and had protective arches. Thanks to this, the wing not only increased in size but also had large lifting force. Fun fact, when scientists first encountered the remains of Meganeura, they were baffled. According to the ideas of the time, insects of this size simply couldn't exist. This is due to the peculiarities of the respiratory system of insects. Oxygen is supplied to the tissues passively through a system of tracheae. This imposes very strict limits on the possible size of the animal. As you understand, the maximum allowable value did not coincide with the size of the prehistoric dragonfly. Okay, let's move on. What animal has always been extremely successful at hunting flying creatures? For example, reptiles. In ancient times, there was a crocodile that wouldn't mind eating a tasty and nourishing dragonfly if it was near it. I'm talking about Deinosuchus, a giant that even the dinosaurs were afraid of. In general, this monster is incredibly similar to the usual crocodile from our time. But unlike its modern relative, it had a much more impressive size. The length from 26 to 39 feet was the norm for it. Of course, as the crocodile crocodile's size grew, its jaw could not help but improve. No matter how you look at it, the muscles became larger, the ligaments became stronger, and the teeth hardened. Thanks to its powerful jaw, the prehistoric crocodile could easily attack anyone that was imprudent to approach the water body in which it was hiding. At this point, Deinosuchus jumped out at the prey and grabbed it by any limb, then dragged it underwater and deprived the prey of access to oxygen. As soon as the target stopped moving, the crocodile could safely get back to land and enjoy the hearty meal. Did you want to see the largest land carnivorous mammal in history? If yes, then please, Andrewsarchus is at your service. In 1932, on the territory of China, scientists conducted an excavation, wanting to find something interesting. At that moment, they could not imagine how valuable a find they were about to come across. The skull of a previously unknown prehistoric creature was in front of the people. It had a length of 33 inches, with a width of 22 inches at the level of suborbital arches. At that time, scientists had not yet come across such huge skulls of land mammals, so the find immediately began to be studied carefully. At first, people attributed the creature to one of the ancient huge pigs. Then the boundaries expanded, and the study involved all artiodactyls. Nevertheless, it was not possible to come to a concrete conclusion. Here's an illustration that demonstrates one of the options of the prehistoric predator appearance. As you understand, it led a terrestrial lifestyle and had an impressive jaw, which was its main weapon. Thanks to its many teeth, Andrewsarchus could easily break the bones of its opponent and get what it wanted. Nevertheless, it was definitely not of high intelligence, which is why it was often trapped by more agile creatures. This, by the way, was the main reason for its extinction. And since we so often talk about record-breaking prehistoric creatures, it would be strange not to mention Quetzalcoatlus, the largest flying creature of all time. Its remains were first found in 1971 on the territory of North America, in the state of Texas. This pterosaur was named after the feathered serpent called Quetzalcoatl, an Aztec deity. This pterosaur lived approximately 70 to 66 million years ago. It was distinguished from others by its long hind limbs and incredible wings. The wings, by the way, consisted of a leathery membrane reinforced with soft connective tissue fibers. Thanks to this, Quetzalcoatlus could use them as a tool for defense. In addition, the wingspan reached 36 feet, which means that the combat distance absolutely suited the animal. As for the tail, on the one hand, there was one. On the other hand, there wasn't. I mean, it was very short and underdeveloped. In general, it was practically not used. However, this did not prevent the ancient creature from feeling great in the sky. Hollow bones reduced the weight of the pterosaur, and the hair protected its body from hypothermia during flight. Fishermen often find sea creature remnants washed ashore. Some of them can astound you. Huge crocodile. Crocodiles are predatory creatures that everyone knows about. No one wants to encounter this monster in person because staying alive after such a thing would be difficult, to say the least. And I'm talking about ordinary predators, the ones that science knows about. But there was one exception in history. Travelers who explored the still poorly explored lands at that time were walking around Australia and accidentally stumbled upon this giant. At first, it may not be clear what it is. An octopus? A crocodile? Some kind of an alien monster? These and many other thoughts didn't leave the travelers' minds. They couldn't find it out alone, so it was decided to wait for the scientists. It turned out to be a mutated crocodile which should have died within a few days after its birth. But at the time of encounter with people, it had already lived at least 2 years. The further fate of the creature remained unknown. We can only guess what exactly the people did to it, and what would you do in their place? Write in the comments. The first giant. No matter how you look at it, even though crocodiles can be so huge, we can put up with it. After all, we see them often enough, even if on the internet, not in person. The next creature for most will be a real discovery, because it is, as some scientists believe, a previously unknown reptile species, which is at the same time the first giant on our planet. One of the representatives of Ichthyosaurus, which dominated the early stage of the age of the dinosaurs. The fossils that people stumbled upon include a 6.5-foot skull, part of the spine, a shoulder, and front flippers. Thanks to careful research, it was possible to understand that the big creature existed at least 240 million years ago. Ordinary ichthyosaurs, so you understand, were from 6.5 to 10 feet long. But this one beat them all by a huge margin. The found giant was at least 56 feet long. Scientists believe that this species reached this size purely because of predation. The more they ate, the bigger they became. In this case, it's even scary to talk about the potential strength and ferocity of this monster. huge arthropod. For our next discovery, you and I will travel to Canada because there is a special place where marine sedimentary rocks from the Cambrian explosion period lie. These sediments are called the Burgess Shale. Due to the unique conditions in which these shales were formed, the soft tissue imprints on the Earth's first animals have been preserved inside them. In this amazing place, researchers came across very large prints of an ancient multicellular creature. Representatives of its species had large size, very elongated head, and a large set of long whiskers, tentacles that helped them to extract food from the ocean floor or from the surrounding water. The new arthropod you're looking at now, however, differed from its relatives in terms of its record-breaking size. In length, these individuals reached completely uncharacteristic 20 inches, more than half of which was the head and the shell that covered it. At this size, this creature should have had no problems with food at all. Its tentacles were long enough to grab any food particles that they dug out of the ground with the help of a head shell. The reason why this 500-million-year-old arthropod became extinct is still unknown. Sea dragon. The following story makes you believe in miracles. There's no other way to say it. A sailor from England said that he personally saw a real monster in the waters near his native land. Of course, no one believed him, but soon the man proved his words. He stated that one sunny afternoon, he was sailing through the water and looking for a place to fish when suddenly his vessel collided with something. He thought he had accidentally hit a rock, but when he looked around, he saw no obstruction nearby. Shark fins, some large creatures, none of them were in his sight either. A few seconds passed and there was another hit, and soon an unknown huge predator, which resembled either a dolphin or a shark, jumped out of the water. The man tried to catch it and he succeeded. However, he says he's not going to show the remains to anyone. The only thing he shared with the people was the point where the great-grandfathers of the creature he found lay. And here, indeed, the remains were real. What's interesting is that the British, as one, stated that the age of this creature did not correspond to the usual. That is, it's not considered ancient. It turns out there's a chance that some mysterious monsters really swim in our waters to this day. Or is it just a misunderstanding and a mistake of scientists? Although, sometimes I think the size of the animal is definitely not something to pay attention to. In this story, scientists caught an abnormal worm that lived over 300 million years ago. Even though it wasn't multi-meter long, no one obviously wanted to pick it up, they were thought to be unrivaled in ancient times. They could reach 5 feet in length, build around themselves a protective shell in the form of a lime tube with 2 small flaps on the front, and live for many decades. Of course, their nature and true essence could only be guessed at by conclusion and logic, but here the unbelievable thing happened. Instead of the usual shell, which previously scientists had found all the time, someone stumbled upon a still alive worm. The scientists carefully cleaned the creature of the slime that had covered almost its entire body and began to examine it. It looked very disgusting. It's even scary to imagine that something like this is crawling on the planet to this day, and it's not a relic of the past. That's it for today. What from this episode impressed you the most? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.